There is a story that most high performing people carry that they might never have examined out loud. It is the story of who they are, where they come from, what they have survived, why they are the way they are. Most people protect that story. They're afraid and they don't even want to examine it. And sometimes examining it so closely might, in their view, lead to some things falling apart. But my guest today is someone who examined it and someone who did that and things did not fall. James spent most of his life as an adopted person, carrying the unresolved question about his identity. In his 70s, after a career, after generations of working and generating billions in the world of work and his career generating billions in revenue for over 140 companies, and a DNA discovery revealed he has 15 half siblings. 15, right? Is that correct, James?
15 is it.
15
Yeah.
half siblings and a birth father whose world James describes as complicated and sometimes disturbing. That revelation at that stage of life forced James to completely rewrite the story he had told himself for decades. So today we have James to really share with us his experiences that did not produce bitterness, that produce someone who is more grounded, produce someone who is more resilient, and someone who is willing to share some of the things, some of the lessons that he has learned. Today, I hope his message brings clarity to someone and makes someone gets better clarity on where they are. Some of our listeners today might be leaders, well packaged on the outside, but on the inside, still grappling with identity and some of those critical questions that are being unresolved. We have a wonderful guest today. James, you are welcome to the Clarity Mandate podcast.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for coming. James, you discovered 15 half siblings in your 70s. Most people would describe that as a stabilizing kind of an experience, but you describe it as producing clarity.
Mm.
What is the difference between a revelation that breaks someone and the one in your view and in your own words that actually makes them to get more clarity?
If you can imagine not knowing some things about who you are and wondering your whole life what that is. And if you look at the mind like a computer, there's part of the processing of the brain that's always working on who am I? Who am I related to? The person that just walked by me, could that be somebody I'm related to and not knowing? So, as somebody who's adopted, part of your uh, processing always is whether it's conscious, yeah, or in most cases it's unconscious, but you're processing that. And that's filling up your mind with something that you could be doing, like in the need hierarchy, you could be achieving more things towards self-actualization in life, right? And so it's very difficult to describe because I met my birth mother over 20 years ago. Birth father was the last piece of it this last year. And it's been such a piece that in my life, and knowing now, if you can imagine your life is kind of puzzle pieces. We're figuring it out, and especially as an adoptee, it's nature versus nurture, right? So my parents that raised me, there were certain characteristics and wonderful things. I had an amazing mother who was a very strong mentor, believed in me like that. There's that song, Loves Me Like a Rock. I mean, that was her. Um, and so it brought that last piece together. There are elements of the story. I used to think that, there were perfect families out there, and, because I was adopted, it wasn't perfect. What is freed up in my life is really a deeper understanding of other people around me and the vulnerability. And I'd have to say, being vulnerable is one of the most powerful things you can do. It's not always being perfect and doing everything the right way, being right every time. It's our human side is being open and being vulnerable. There are people I've known for 30 or 40 years who I've told the story to. They're telling me things I'd never heard of before, that they had a son from a previous relationship that nobody knew about, or their father had something they're carrying, that going and being open, not trauma bombing people all the time. I'm ready to people to do that too.
Yeah.
But being being open and being vulnerable about your experiences is very powerful. It gives people permission to be human with you. And in the workplace, I still do quite a bit of advisory work for companies. I'm really working with a lot of the CEOs, a lot of the leaders I work with on being vulnerable and being open. It creates quite a different workplace. When I started out my career after graduate school in my 20s, I felt like I had to be perfect. And my hair looks a little bit like it this morning because I just worked out, but I felt like I had to have that slick back, perfect Gordon Gecko Wall Street hair. And I actually naturally have pretty curly hair, and
Mhm.
I've let myself grow into my humanness because of finding out the story. My birth father and birth mother, I believe it sounds like they met at a party when he came over in the army during or just after the Korean War here in Washington State. And he went back to Idaho, where he was from, finished college. He was a two-sport person in college, baseball and football. Played in the Pittsburgh Pirates organization, AAA baseball, became a great sports coach, and he went on to get a master's degree in physics, taught at one of the universities in Idaho, lost his teaching credentials because he enjoyed students apparently, and had some drug addictions. And so this brilliant person, like very, very gifted athlete,
Yeah.
couldn't quite put his life together. He had things in his life he experienced. He found out when he was 15 that the father that raised him wasn't his birth father, and his mom told him she had a fling, had run down the road, that kind of thing. So not perfect. There are five birth mothers that he had been involved in. The youngest sibling, I'm 71 right now. My youngest sibling is 23. So he was productive for a long
He was
time.
active for a long time.
And
Wow.
so I really had the opportunity to see my nature and my birth mom's side. I'd known her a bit longer, and the nurture. And there's not, in my experience, there's not a clean answer of what rules nature versus nurture. I know nurture has a big impact, and I had, as I'm getting to know my siblings, I'm very close to one that lives in the area here, and she had four stepfathers growing up, and just we all have different lives than he
Mhm.
had. But the one thing I believe we all got was grit from him. Despite his circumstances, he did very well. But yeah, it's been the experience has been an amazing experience. The
Wow.
half sister I have here, I worked at Microsoft for a period, and she was an athletic trainer at the club that was affiliated with Microsoft the same time I was there. Now, the area I live in, Seattle, she's an owner for an athletic club that is half a mile from my house and has been for some time. So, if you can imagine, I'm sure we've walked by each other before.
Yeah,
Never knew. And
never knew.
yeah, and now the people that know us in common said, like, I don't know where the energy came from, but she's like you are, but a female, just that kind of similar type of energy. And
Wow.
that's quite an experience to all of a sudden see people that resemble you, not entirely physically, but in terms of
Mhm.
mannerisms and that, and you go, wow, there are other people in my tribe out there. So it's been a phenomenal experience. And
Wow.
like I said, the one emotion that keeps coming up for me is just more peace. And the insecurities I've had in my past that you mentioned, like in my career, people called me a chameleon. And my wife especially said, "You're always such a people pleaser." And I did that because of issues related to adoption and that. I was
Mhm.
um, always looking for that attachment with a fear of being abandoned. And back when I was born, they didn't let humans touch babies for 5 days. So there was no human bonding for 5 days, which is traumatic for a child. And so issues like that manifested themselves in me and insecurities. And I see that clearly. So I'm not, I don't believe I'm a jerk. Certainly, everybody talks about boundaries. My boundaries are quite different than they were before because I know
Wow.
more of who I am. And
Wow.
I still, of course, I want to please people, my children and grandchildren and that, but there's less insecurity around that than there was before. I do it for different reasons. So, yeah, my life's been rocked.
Wow. Thanks for sharing, James. This is really an amazing discovery and an eye opener, like you say, to many other people out there. The peace that you are experiencing. I mean, the new discoveries of things that were so close, but you didn't know, like your sister in the same city. But James, your birth father, and you say, your description of him was like complicated, sometimes disturbing, but you chose not to let it define your identity or even your relationship with him thereafter. That choice at this age requires to me a specific kind of discernment, a specific kind of really knowing who you are and the way you carry yourself. So, how did you make that kind of a decision? Because many people struggle with anger, with resentment, like why? But you seem to be on the side of grace, on the side of trying to understand him more and understand more of his actions and some of the things that might have even impacted him, talking about even his own growing up, that it's really eye-opening for many people out there to see how to approach, because I tell you, there is a lot of Jameses out there that have similar issues, and your approach, I think it's quite empowering.
Thank you. Yeah, as I mentioned, I met my birth mom over 20 years ago, and my reaction to her was different. And I'd have to say it was mixed because with her, what I really had to work through was I was recycled at birth. I mean, she gave me up, regardless of whether that was the best choice or not. Still was rejected. And I'd had time to process through that. And the other thing that occurred was she passed away about 5 months ago. And so I had, as humans, if we're around long enough, we get a little bit more understanding of other people and empathy. And I got more empathy about what she did. And then this last piece, she didn't know. She couldn't really tell me who the birth father was. Even when I showed her the picture of him, she just kind of went, huh, he's a good looking guy. I had a lot of fun when I was a teenager. And, I mean, that's not exactly what I wanted to hear. There's not a beautiful story. It's just there was a party but
Yeah,
on the other hand, I wouldn't be here if that didn't happen. So
yeah.
I've had a daily gratitude practice for over 25 years.
Wow.
And it's you just have to put a stake in it and go, that's why I'm here. I'm alive. Doesn't
Wow.
all the other stuff doesn't matter. And the fact that I had the parents I did that raised me, um, so fortunate. For me, it's I'm grateful for the whole thing. I just love it. I embrace it. And I love to tell the story because it's my story.
It's an
And
empowering story, James.
thank you. And on the one hand, I never got to meet my birth father. He passed away in 14. In some ways, I wish I had. And in some ways, it's probably better I didn't. And the birth sister I have, Donnie Ray, he didn't see her for 10 years from the time she was 9 till the time she was 19. And there were a lot of issues that came up with her because of that. And I didn't have that. I had parents who were there. Beginning of our lives were a bit different. But yeah, I celebrate the story. It's a cool story. Every time I tell people, people are like, "Oh, that should be a mini series, and you should delve into the lives of all your half siblings and how this came together." So I've been writing about it and journaling about it. And yeah, it's a hell of a story, and it's my story.
Yeah, it's an empowering story, and I think we all here on a different mission, and I think your story, your identity, it's part of your mission, your purpose, and everything happens in its own right time, like even the timing of your discoveries and everything. But you have, like, you give credit to your parents, your nurture parents that raised you with so much love, and no doubt you grew up to be the kind of person you've been helping companies generate billions in revenue across different industries. And you have described your drive for clarity as fueling that work. So I'd like you to share with us some specific mechanisms. Maybe how did you, while on the one side you have an unresolved identity questions around your head that you're carrying almost your entire life, and eventually they get resolved, but yet in the midst of all that, you are building and you are solving corporate problems, and you are doing just great in the marketplace. How did all that come together when you look at your career and everything how you had to put yourself together?
Good question. Maybe a little bit of a long answer. There was a lot of fuel behind that. And I have to admit, some of those things were insecurity driven. What happened when I met my birth mom was she told me two things. One, she told me how much she loved men and sex. And I was like, okay, great. I'm glad I wouldn't be here otherwise. And then the other thing she told me was that her mother gave her something they felt would get her to abort. So she wasn't sure if I was born alive or dead. So yeah, she told me she found out what it was. It was quinine, which is a myth about what it does. And then when I was 7, my mom that raised me, we were her mother, my grandmother, we were sitting at a dinner table. I was raised as an only child, as we talked about. And she turned to me and looked at me and she said, you'll never amount to as much as your cousins because you're not blood. And, from that, my mom was livid, of course. But if you can imagine hearing something like that at 7, and yeah, I mean, everybody, I think everybody I've talked to has some experience like that,
Mhm.
but it gave me a fuel and it didn't break me. But my mom started taking me, she was a very successful businesswoman in real estate and one of the first female real estate brokers in Seattle. And so she'd take me to real estate seminars and motivational seminars. There was a motivational speaker called Zig Ziglar back in the day. And she'd take me to that and we'd do daily affirmations and dream boards and that kind of thing. So she was always there. I got in trouble in high school I'm not sure if the story was entirely true, but she told me she went to a fortune teller when I was 2, and that fortune teller told me I'd be a great man. So I'd get in trouble and she'd say, I don't agree with you, you're grounded or whatever. But I went to this fortune teller when you were 2 years old, and here's what he said: you're going to be a great person. This is just a bump in the roadmap. So I had somebody who really believed in me. And the times when I came to that fork in the road for making decisions that wouldn't have served me, as I look back now, it was like, I'm not going to do this because my destiny is over here. The one thing I'm not sure if I'd go back and change now is as I moved into my career, I always felt other people would have had an edge on me because I was this adopted kid, or I didn't have what they had. And so one of the first career positions I had, they asked me how I would outproduce this company who was dominant competitor in the market. I said, I will outwork them. I'll work harder than them. The workaholism was an insecurity for me to prove myself. And it turned into vacations with young family when I had it, when I was on the phone most of the time. And it wasn't up until probably 15 years ago or so that I worried that even though I'd had this significant career success, I worried, and I woke up in the middle of the night in a sweat, worried that we'd be out on the street in a shopping cart or living in a refrigerator box or that kind of thing. So that insecurity was always there, and it certainly gave me drive, but I invested a lot of time in it. That today I'm much more secure for a lot of different reasons, but the peace of knowing, my roots and my background, and even though it's imperfect, it gives me a clear picture of who I am, and the who I am today, even if I was faced with that situation, would handle it differently.
Wow, that's powerful, James. And like you say, in your words, your situation that is imperfect, and in my view, and everyone I have come across, we all have imperfect backgrounds. Just our situations are different, but none of it is perfect. And James, you are now in your 70s. You describe yourself as fueled by the revelations rather diminished by them. So there is a narrative in leadership culture that the major personal work should be done by 40 or so. I mean, many people believe in your 40s, if you haven't made it or so, like now. But you are in your 70s synthesizing, discovering, and your life is being reshaped even at this age. Your life, it's really different to what many people averagely would say, like 70s retirement in quote. So, what does late life revelation teach you about timing?
Well, I don't like Sudoku, crossword puzzles, and pickleball. So yeah, it's really fascinating. It's part of this whole journey. When I work with companies, that what we talked about earlier in the conversation is that part of my brain that was processing who am I, what's my journey, has freed up. And so I'm finding, like, I had an amazing insight about AI in the workplace that nobody's come up with. And it's freed up my brain to process emotion and process just what's going on in the world. So I would say the one thing that's really opened up for me is, and I talked to my one grandson's very interested in what it takes to succeed and everything. And what I talk about, especially at that age, is because things are changing so fast. I mean, there's so much information coming at us, is being able to recognize a pattern. So pattern recognition is very important. Then from there, and I'll get to where what's happened with me, it's pattern integration. So how does this pattern and this pattern fit? And those are some of the biggest insights we get as humans, behaviorally and organizationally, business wise. The third piece in that, or the third step, then, is pattern creation. So recognizing the pattern, integrating the pattern, and then creating. a new pattern, and I'm just on fire in terms of that. It's just the part of me that's opened up, taking the 40 years of experience I've had in the business world, and that I'm able to see things that I hadn't seen before. So, what's that expression? Age is a number. And I'm finding what I'm able to see and the way I'm able to get the information quickly, just in my own mental capacities, is incredible. It's like, what was a movie? It was during the pandemic about the woman who was the chess master who would she'd play her game on the wall. I start to see things in those patterns faster than I
Wow. Fascinating. James, what will you tell someone maybe in their 50s, 60s, and who is still struggling with identity and wondering whether it's too late for them to examine their story and the things they've been carrying about their own identity? What would be the one advice to someone thinking that maybe it's late?
don't leave any questions unanswered. It's part of your identity and who you are. And going into it seems like Pandora's box. And for me, it wasn't. For other people who are adoptees and other people who've gone through trauma, I mean,
Mm.
being adoptee is just one piece of trauma.
Has a
Everybody
bit.
has some stuff,
That's right.
And like my sister, Donnie Ray, who I've become very close to, she's learned to embrace the traumas she's gone through. And I think it's very inspirational to figure out a way to do it. And we're here and we're alive and celebrate that aliveness. You'll never have this time and space like you do now. And 20 years from now, you wish you made the most of it, and you'll
Of the
look
moment.
back and go, this was such a great time.
Oh, wow.
So it allows you to make the most of your life. Everybody in tech talks about optimizing things, but it really optimizes who you are and where you are. And it's not too late. It's
Wow.
not too late for anything. I mean, I can point to examples of people in their 60s and 70s that just hit major revelations and really things clicked. We never know what our time is.
Thank
And
you. Leave no question unanswered. You heard James. If you are still listening to this podcast and you're battling similar questions of your identity, it is not late. Leave no question unanswered and keep carrying on. And the name of this podcast is the Clarity Mandate. And I believe that there is a time in each and everyone's life where clarity stops being optional and the stories that you tell yourself about who you are, where you came from, eventually determines the quality of every decision that you make. And we've been having this conversation, and you've been explaining to us how the quality of your decisions, insecurities, and all these were related to some of the perceptions that you have, the insecurities, and all that. And you have paid the price of not knowing some of these questions or the answers to these questions at your early life. But in spite of that, you still made good of all your opportunities. Maybe you would have done even more excellent in some, but what do you understand now um, about your life, about the kind of clarity that you have, even about some of the cost that you have paid that you could not have learned any other way except by living the life you lived? I mean, this is your story, like you put it.
yeah, I mean, it's a kick-ass story. It's it's a great story and it's my story. And some of the things I'm involved in a reunion from our high school. And there were people I looked at that I thought they had everything in the world going for them. And I mean, they've had reasonable careers and that kind of thing. And I just wouldn't trade my life for anybody's right now.
Wow. Powerful, powerful. James will not trade his life for anybody's life, irrespective of the things that were revealed, he still believed that everything came together to bring him to this powerful, empowering person. I mean, empowering companies, empowering corporations to really deal with some of these questions of insecurity, even in the workplace, that affects performance, affects the bottom line, affects people relating to one another. So, James, as we begin to round up, is there a book, a practice, or a person that inspires you that maybe you want to recommend to someone still battling with some of the questions that you battled with for years?
Yeah, it depends on the questions they're looking at. There's some great references for people who are adopted. Certainly, one of a great writer, she does a lot of work around that is a woman named Anne with an E, Heffron. She's one of my favorites in terms of like wellness and health. My birth sister, Donnie Ray Shaw, is somebody who does virtual coaching and that. She went through a tremendous amount of trauma and she has a mental practice, if you will, but a lot of it is is physical, and that got her out of the trauma and into her body and in touch with those parts of her body that were impacted by the trauma. I would encourage anybody, because everybody's gone through some of those
That's
things.
right.
Um, it's finding your own groove and learning. This may sound counterintuitive to some people, but just stay with it and work with it and never give up on it and embrace those challenges. It's like this has made me who I am today, and never give up. Persistence is important. And I think I got persistence because they tried to kill me when I was born and they told me I wouldn't amount to as much. And, a few, here I am,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I've learned to thrive through all of that and really celebrate that. I've spoken with so many people who've had issues, other issues in terms of trauma, and felt like their circumstances did not give them the opportunities to succeed, and that's what I felt too. And gosh, even when I was succeeding and having very successful years in that, I always felt like it wasn't quite enough. And if I could rewind that tape, it would be like just take the time to celebrate it and don't, of course, get complacent. Keep going. And it's really important to love who you are, where you
Wow.
are, when you are, right
I,
there.
I love that word. Stop and celebrate every milestone. Keep pushing. Don't get complacent. Love who you are, where you are, and just keep doing what you are doing. Thank you very much, James. Any last thoughts you want to share with our audience before we round up and where they can find you?
Yeah, it's an important part when you in your journey is I quote, and I'm not a practicing Catholic or anything, but I love some of the things St. Francis said that it's in the giving that we truly receive. And I really learned that. And that's where I am. The um, giving back to other people or being there or when I was touring last month, this person fell down and they had a baby carriage and pulled a baby over with them, and people started walking by and I walked up and helped that person up. Little things like that have such an impact on you and other people. Could make that person's day that somebody actually stopped to help them rather than going by. The person on the street we walk by sometimes, you never know what their circumstances are. So, I would say be there for other people. Anybody can be there. You don't have to be wealthy or that. It's just when somebody needs support and help, be there for them. And they've
Wow.
found, you probably know, they found in studies when you do something for somebody else, they feel better. But what it does for your, was it oxytocin in your
Hmm.
body
Yes, yes,
is you're
yes.
elevated.
You
So
you feel even much better.
exactly. So St. Francis said, it's in the giving that we truly receive. And I believe that's an important piece of it. So we'll always have that perspective too of looking back. what I did over the last 5 years is like, why did I do that? It's life. We keep learning, but learning how to accept and love, like we talked about, is the answer. And it's not just yourself. Loving other people is a beautiful thing. And
Wow,
being
thank you. Thank you very much, James. It's been an amazing episode of Discovery, talking to James, who faced the hardest questions that unfortunately some people actually exit this world without finding answers. But James has been so blessed to get answers to these questions, and this has actually helped him to actually restructure even his approach to life and everything in his 70s, that he is giving back. You just heard him doing some of the things that his story has empowered him to do. I just want to thank you, James, for really going out there and doing the things that you did to get this identity, and not just for the sake of knowing, but for the sake of empowering yourself. And now you are empowering individuals, corporation, and you are a better person in society. The work you have done, the work you continue to do, and what you just shared with our listeners, that let's be out there giving. Let's be giving. It's in the giving that you receive. It's in the giving that you get your blessings. You want to put it in biblical words. And to everyone listening out there in our audience who is carrying this burden of the story of your identity, and you've never examined, or you were being adopted and lots of things, clarity is on the other side. Like James said, it is not late. Go out there and still try and get your questions answered. I just want to thank you, James, for sharing this with us. And I am Dr. Vivian Atud, and this has been the Clarity Mandate. Thank you.
it was awesome. Thanks.
Thanks, James.